Good morning, Duplin family. As your principal has just stated, our learning targets for this morning center around two of the strategies of the Common Instructional Framework: collaborative group work and literacy groups. But before we dive into that, I'd like to take a few minutes to put all of this year's professional development into context for you. Believe it or not, the directors and the coaches have not been making this up as we go along. There has been and will continue to be a deliberate order and plan for rolling out the information this year. Let's back up to October 7th, our first Common Core Day, where we were all introduced to the North Carolina New Schools Project. If you go to Duplin County's homepage and click on Departments, and then race to the top Team Resources, you'll see over on the left-hand side a bulleted list where you'll now click on Early College Initiative and scroll down. Keep scrolling. Okay, now you'll see North Carolina New Schools Project. On October 7th, we all were introduced to the North Carolina Schools Project through this PowerPoint that we're not going to click on now and go through again, but I just wanted to remind you that it's there. This is an organization that we've partnered with as we transform our entire district into an early college model. Just recall that it's there. Know that we're following North Carolina New Schools Project's model for school innovation to include their 6 design principles and their common instructional framework. There's also data located on this PowerPoint that explains why we chose to partner with North Carolina New Schools Project. And again, we're not going to take the time to look at it now. Just know that it works, and that's why we have chosen to follow it. Also, in this PowerPoint and up above, there's a link to the New Schools Project website where you'll find a wealth of other information about them, and you'll also see many Duplin County faces on their website, from Dr. Abasahan to Kevin Smith, the former principal at Duplin Early College, to Anna Outlaw's blog, who is a current teacher there, and also a student, Louis Orellano, if I'm saying that correctly, is also featured on this website. So back to October 7th, we understand that everything we're doing is operating under the umbrella of North Carolina New Schools Project. Next, we're going to stay there. Thank you. Scroll back. Okay. Next, and still on October 7th, we received an overview of the North Carolina New Schools Project design principles: ready for college, powerful teaching and learning, personalization, redefined professionalism, leadership, and purposeful design. You remember the strips of paper you worked on, putting the group in your groups, and you worked on putting those under the right heading, and everybody's nodding because that was a fun activity. And remember, the activity was not about getting the right answers, but about learning the principles and looking at a completed rubric at the end of the activity that defined beginning stages all the way to new paradigms for each principle. So we went from North Carolina New Schools Project to a little bit more specific to their design principles in October. Now moving into January, we got even more specific when we started looking at the New Schools Project Common Instructional Framework. This is where we finally bring it down to the classroom level, where the teacher can say, what does all this stuff have to do with me and my instruction? Well, in January 24th, we did a jigsaw activity to introduce us to the 6 practices that we will incorporate in all of our classes K-12 in this county: collaborative group work, writing to learn, literacy groups, questioning, scaffolding, and classroom talk. Now, none of these practices are particularly new or earth-shattering by themselves. However, a consistent K-12 emphasis on them can and will transform and revive our instruction. So that brings us to today. North Carolina New Schools Project, big umbrella, bringing it down to the design principles. bringing it down to the Common Instructional Framework, and now today, honing in on just two of those 6 strategies where we can actually see the proverbial rubber meeting the road for our classroom teachers. So if we can go back to slide 3 of today's PowerPoint. We're going to be talking specifically about collaborative group work and literacy groups, 2 of the strategies in the Common Instructional Framework that fall under the design principle of powerful teaching and learning. So you see how it's all connected. Let's define powerful teaching and learning. Commonly held standards for high-quality, rigorous instruction ensures the development of critical thinking, application, and problem-solving skills often neglected in traditional settings. Definition of collaborative group work: bringing students together in small groups to engage in learning, well-planned and strategic. And finally, literacy groups: collaborative structure for understanding text and engaging in higher levels of discourse, employs group roles and discussion guidelines. Hopefully you can see how these fit under the design principle of powerful teaching and learning. Just in case you can't yet, we're going to look at our design principle rubric one more time. So if we can go back to our webpage, the Race to the Top Team resources, we want to click on the design principle rubric, the second bullet there. Now don't forget about this rubric. You've seen it before. You'll see it again because sometime in the spring, all schools will be looking at this instrument as we delve into a self-assessment process. But I want you to go down to page 4 of this document, Powerful Teaching and Learning, beginning stages, all the way to new paradigm. Beginning stages, it says, teachers provide limited opportunities for students to work in groups. That's beginning stages. All the way over to new paradigm, where students effectively organize and manage their own learning teams. And you've seen that verbiage, learning teams, somewhere else. You've seen it in the new North Carolina Teacher Evaluation Instrument about student learning teams. Now let's go to page 5 of this document. Beginning stage. It's okay if this is where we are right now, but this is not where we want to stay with any of these principles. Beginning stage. Teacher talk dominates instruction. I would dare to say that many of our classrooms look like that right now. All the way over to new paradigms. Students help each other exercise and communicate sound reasoning, understand connections, make complex choices, blah, blah, blah. The students are doing the talking, just like they will be doing in collaborative group works. Last one I'll share with you. There's limited use of student engagement strategies. Are students ultimately engaged when the adult's the one in the front of the classroom doing all the talking? Or are they more likely to be engaged when they're working in groups? Reading, writing, thinking, and talking in every classroom every day. So, I just wanted to go, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I just wanted to go back to that again to continue to show everyone how what we're doing all fits together. Just because you've heard it once back in October doesn't mean you'll never hear it again. It will keep coming back up as we continue on our journey. Okay, enough scaffolding. Let's go to slide 4 of today's PowerPoint and finally get into collaborative group work and literacy groups. On this slide, you'll see a couple of key quotes about collaborative group work and literacy groups just to engage us and get us into the right frame of mind. This first quote comes from an article that you'll read today. Says that collaborative group work is a key ingredient to creating the kind of school culture in which everyone shares a deep commitment to one another's success. Again, this comes from an article from University Park Campus School, the first school where Common Instructional Framework was ever used, and we'll read the entire article today. Second bullet, collaborative group work and literacy groups prepare every student academically and professionally for any college or career. If you think back to our last Common Core Day, we read an article called Rigor Redefined, and it talked about what employers are looking for in our students. And it's not that they're looking for the nuts and bolts of the job or the nuts and bolts of the content. They're looking for students and graduates and employees that can talk and think and communicate and collaborate. And we're going to teach them how to do that K-12 through this strategy. Last bullet, allows for the use of academic content to teach 21st century survival skills. That same article, Rigor Redefined, talked about the 7 survival skills needed in the 21st century. The teacher must become the facilitator, not the keeper of all the knowledge. The students must transition into the ones doing the talking and the learning and the leading. And if we teach our content through that vein of collaborative group work, that will happen. Okay, next slide. Some more things to keep in mind about collaborative group work and literacy groups. We should have put this word in bold, italics, and underlined in bright red, because it takes a lot of planning. It takes a different kind of planning than maybe we're used to. And again, as we read the article today, you'll learn more about the ins and outs of that. But some of the things you have to plan for are assigning your groups. Are they going to be teacher selected or student selected? And both are appropriate at different times, and you know your children and your activities, and you'll be the one to figure that out. Strategic grouping to ensure diversity. This gets into, are the groups going to be homogeneously ability grouped or gender grouped or heterogeneously grouped? Again, both are appropriate at different times, and you'll be the one as the classroom teacher to discern that. But the biggest thing that I want to talk about on this slide is make sure that we are changing instruction, not just the structure of our classrooms. It's about the instruction and the interaction between the students, not the seating arrangement. So just because you've moved your desk into groups of 4 and everybody's working on the same worksheet, that's not collaborative group work, because the children are not collaborating and talking and figuring things out together. So be very, very mindful of not fooling yourself into thinking that you're doing group work just because your kids are sitting that way. It's not about the seating arrangement as much as it is the instruction and the interaction between students. So you will have to modify your classroom layout. And the last 2 bullets are things that we will get into further along into today, but it's going to be important to incorporate group work in your lesson plan. You need to plan for it to happen. It needs to be in your lesson plan. Principals need to begin expecting this in your lesson plans. A lot of times our lesson plans focus on what we're going to teach, which is obviously important, but it fails to dive into how we're going to teach it. And with this Common Instructional Framework and what we're talking about specifically today, the group work, it needs to be in the lesson plan. And we need to hold ourselves accountable to that. And we're going to do an activity today with a lesson plan that you've brought with you, where you can work on it and fine-tune it and figure out a way where maybe you could add some group work and literacy groups into a lesson plan. We're just going to dive right into it. And the last bullet is a collaborative group work, group monitoring tool that you'll be introduced to in a few minutes in a different activity that we do. All right, a little bit more groundwork. Group norms. Just like our adult PLCs have norms to make sure the group operates efficiently and effectively, so will your student groups need to have group norms, and you'll have to help them through that process and until they get used to it. But it's just like your groups as adults, where you're collectively establishing and posting the ground rules and how important it is to adhere to them, some predetermined consequences when things aren't working out so well. Your principal has some sample norms that he or she is going to be passing out to you sometime this morning. But don't skip this step with your students and just throw them in there. Make sure they understand the norms of the group and how it's supposed to all operate up front. Okay, and lastly, group roles are going to be important. That's where the literacy groups, part of this collaborative group work, comes in with the group roles. This is going to ensure that everybody participates and everybody has a specific accountable piece of the puzzle. You know, we've all done group work before where it didn't go so great because one person did all the work and there were two slackers that got credit for it anyway. So this is ensuring the collaboration and ensuring the accountability of every student. So here are some traditional group roles that you've probably heard of before: a group leader or facilitator, recorders, timekeepers, reporters. And then there are some innovative ways to go about assigning roles with things like discussion directors, vocabulary connectors, illuminators, illustrators, summarizers, just to keep it fresh for our students so that they don't get bored with the same thing all the time. But again, we're going to do an activity today that introduces you more in depth to these innovative group roles. So there's a lot of groundwork that has been laid this morning for your work today on collaborative group work and literacy groups. And we hope through the activities that we've designed for today that we're going to practice what we preach, with the importance of collaboration, using the literacy groups to delve into text. So we're ready to do that at this time with our first activity, which is a cube activity. So if you will, at this time, proceed to slide 8. We will get on with the rest of our day.